Thank you very much for this nice introduction. I'm also well aware of the timing. And so instead of doing the normal presentation, we'll take the fast track mode. So my brief presentation, it will be very brief, concentrates on the topic of conscience, because our aim of the conference is how to protect the religious identity. We tried to answer this question during our lectures, and now I would like to offer the final observations from the American perspective. So let's get started. Of course, instead of explaining how religion clauses work in the United States legal system, I choose to quote the Dwight D. Eisenhower, who said that, okay, I will read here, the freedom of a citizen and the freedom of a religious believer are more than intimately related. They are mutually dependent. These two liberties give life to the heart of our nation. We can say the same about the religion clauses. As you see, here is the image of the Janus God with two faces. One direction is the establishment clause. The second direction is the free exercise clause. They all work together. There is, as we say, the play in the joints. They can't work separately, but they must work mutually. So we have to protect the freedom of conscience. And how does the Supreme Court of the United States do it? I would like to concentrate on the case of abortion. We have many threads to talk about the freedom of conscience. We can quote many cases, many issues, but I chose to reflect upon the abortion. So, since the case which was issued, the ruling in 1973, the Roe versus Wade case, which stated that women have a constitutional right to abortion, so we have a new troubling question. If women have a constitutional right to abortion, do medical staff, hospitals, and all others engaged, even indirectly, in financing it, have an obligation to provide it? Of course, the question, luckily, is unanimous: no. As you can see from this quote of the Roe versus Wade ruling, the justices said that, of course, the right of privacy is broad enough to cover the abortion decision. That is well known. But this right is not absolute. It is subject to some limitations. I don't want to get in details regarding the conscience clause in medical field, because we already debated about this topic, but I would like to only add that the American legal system offers quite a good level of protection of medical staff with relations to freedom of conscience. So doctors have the right of religious freedom, which means the government can't force them to participate in procedures which go against their conscience. Freedom of conscience excludes coercion, as you see. If we want to talk about freedom of conscience, we can't talk about any coercion. For that reason, many authorities carved out religious exemptions in many laws across the country. I am citing here only a few of them. This is the Church Amendment, the Weldon Amendment, the Code Snow Amendment, also the Obamacare has these guarantees which protect not only doctors, but also other healthcare providers, institutions who refuse to participate, refer, assist, advise, accommodate abortion. Okay, but that's what relates to the medical stuff. What about other areas when someone can oppose to the right to the duty to finance the abortion or other procedures which can lead to abortion or, for example, sterilization. So I would like to offer you some lessons which can give just a reflection, which can be for some people instructive. Lesson 1 comes from the ruling issued in the 2014 case of Barwell versus Hobby Lobby store. Why this case is so important for the conscience clause? So we must concentrate on the facts of this case. At the heart of this landmark decision was the regulation promulgated by the HHS under the Obamacare Act, which requires specified employers to provide their female employees with coverage for the 20 contraceptive methods approved by the FDA, including the 4 that can cause an abortion. Hobby Lobby stores is a family business owned by the Greens, by the family Greens. They are devout Christians. They honor the Lord in all or what they do and operate the company according to biblical principles. They just couldn't provide and pay for these 4 contraceptive methods as it violated deeply held religious beliefs. So they argued that by complying with the regulation, they would be complicit in abortion. What did the Supreme Court? So, in a 5-4 ruling, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Hobby Lobby stores. So, the court said that the Religious Freedom Restoration Act can be applied to closely held corporations composed of individuals and protect their religious freedom at all times, even in the workplace and even they decide to run a family business. The Religious Freedom Restoration Act states, by the way, that the government shall not substantially burden a person's exercise of religion, even if the burden results from a rule of general applicability. The court concluded that federal agencies cannot just compel religious people to fund what is contrary to their conscience if the government's interests can be furthered by less restrictive means. So the Hobby Lobby store opinion teaches us that federal and state RFRA provisions do matter, and then they can be even applied to closely held corporations. The second lesson comes from the relatively recent case. That's the case of the Little Sisters of the Poor versus Pennsylvania. It's a lengthy case. It lasted almost a decade. And it ended finally last year. A Catholic order of nuns, the Little Sisters of the Poor, they ran homes for the elderly poor across the country as a religious non-profit organization. And they were fighting against the federal government to protect their religious freedom for almost a decade, as I said. Despite some facts that in 2016, the federal Supreme Court issued already an opinion in Zubik versus Barwell and granted the Little Sisters exemption from the contraceptive mandate. Nonetheless, that in 2017, they were given further protection by an executive order issued by President Donald Trump, which in 1 year later led to the adoption of a new rule which grants broader exemptions for religious organizations from complying with the HHS mandate. The Little Sisters were still in court and forced to pay hefty fines. Why? This was because several states challenged the enforcement of federal rules that exempt employers with religious and moral objections from the contraceptive mandate. The case returned to the Supreme Court's bench and offered justices another chance to end this protracted legal battle once and for all and provide not only to the Little Sisters but also to similarly situated religious groups the real protection of their religious freedom. With the decision issued 1 year ago, the Supreme Court, with 7-2 vote, ruled, of course, in favor of the order, allowing them to operate homes for the elderly poor in the United States in a way which is consistent with their Catholic faith, without violating their sincerely held religious convictions and without having to pay fines. So the teaching, the instructive lesson is that we have to fight, even if you are, even if we have to fight for a very long time. Sometimes it's good to do this. Next lesson, lesson number 3. But there are only 4 lessons. Lesson number 3 comes from this year's ruling. This is the ruling of Fulton versus City of Philadelphia. The case began in 2018 after Philadelphia City Council passed a resolution that condemned discrimination that occurs under the guise of religious freedom and instructed the city's Department of Human Services to change its contracting practices. What happened? So Philadelphia didn't want to work with the Catholic services, a Catholic organization, which refused to certify same-sex couples as potential foster parents. Of course, the Supreme Court of the United States, in a unanimous decision, stated that Philadelphia violated the First Amendment's free exercise clause when it stopped working with this organization. Writing for the court, the Justice Roberts observed that it was plain that the Philadelphia's actions burdens the CSS religious exercise by forcing it either to curtail its mission or to certify same-sex couples as foster parents in violation of its stated religious beliefs. Of course, this decision is said to be very narrow, as Justice Alito expressed in his concurring opinion. This decision, I quote, might as well be written on the dissolving paper sold in magic shops. But it really counts. This decision counts because, as you see, on Monday, it's the last ruling, which I want to quote today. The SCOTUS issued a decision in the Roman Catholic Diocese of Albany versus Emami case. It ordered New York courts to rethink the decision in light of the ruling in Fulton versus Philadelphia. Just to be clear, New York's law has a very limited religious exemption for religious groups that primarily serve and employ people of their own religion. This exemption is so narrow that Jesus himself wouldn't qualify for it, because many religious groups offer these services to people regardless of their faith background. That's the problem. And if they do so, they must offer abortion services in their insurance plans. A coalition of religious groups from a variety of denominations. We have Roman Catholic dioceses, an order of goat herding Anglican nuns, Baptist, Lutheran churches, Catholic ministers. They all sued New York, arguing that the law forced them to violate their deeply held religious beliefs about the sanctity of life. So these 4 short lessons, and the last one suggests that we can win. Let's keep our fingers crossed that this will be another religious exemptions. So they all show us that the freedom of conscience must be protected. And above all, we must also take into consideration how important is the freedom of conscience. We want to talk about the abortion laws. We want to introduce them in some countries, but it cannot be a one-direction narrative. It must be a dialogue. I want to end with this fantastic quote by Justice Antonin Scalia. More important than your obligation to follow your conscience, or at least prior to it, is your obligation to form your conscience correctly. Thank you very much.